We're back with 20 more dashcam videos sent directly to us by the people who captured them. From rollovers to rear ends, side swipes to slowdowns, this week's episode has it all, so buckle up. Ernie was headed to Costco for dog medicine when an oncoming driver ran a red arrow and turned in front of Ernie as he proceeded through a green light. The T-bone impact rolled Ernie's Toyota 4Runner completely over before it ended up back on its wheels. With his doors stuck and windshield shattered, he ended up climbing out through the rear hatch with the help of a bystander. Ernie filed an insurance claim with his dashcam footage as evidence after responding police officers retrieved his dashcam for him. The other driver's insurance provider accepted liability and cut him a check for $40,000 US. Obviously, his 4Runner was totaled, but he used the insurance settlement to replace it with a new one in the same color, along with an improved dashcam with both front and rear angles. Unsurprisingly, the cops told Ernie that the other driver had claimed Ernie had run a red light, and his dashcam footage made all the difference. If you need a dashcam, we put a link to our recommendation in the description. Shia was driving down a ramp leading from one highway to another. Suddenly, he encountered a wrong-way driver coming straight toward him. Shia swerved into the other lane without having time to see if it was clear. Miraculously, he made it through the mayhem without a scratch. He called 911 but couldn't stop because he had a car full of passengers. Dino was waiting for traffic on the other side of an intersection to pull forward before proceeding through a green light. Suddenly, an oncoming driver turned across traffic, cutting in front of a pickup truck. I bet the driver didn't expect the cop behind them to dish up a helping of instant justice after she nearly caused a collision. Dina told us watching our channels has helped her avoid multiple collisions. Thanks, Dina. Simon was on his way home from work when he drifted too close to the edge of the road while rounding a bend. When he yanked the steering wheel to the left, he overcorrected and lost control. After crossing the oncoming lane, Simon's Ford Explorer slammed into a tree before stopping. After climbing out of the SUV, Simon was checked out by bystanders and first responders. Thankfully, he only sustained minor injuries. The impact with the tree totaled Simon's Explorer. His insurance provider paid him enough to replace it with a Jeep Grand Cherokee, but he still misses his Ford. He told us he never thought he'd be sending in his own video, and he offered his condolences to those injured in collisions. Simon says, "Be safe out there, everyone. You never know what might happen." This submitter watched the driver of a car dive for a late exit and get some instant justice for their trouble. That trooper dove for the exit almost as sharply as the other driver did. Our submitter told us he sees people do this all the time here, but I'm guessing they don't usually get pulled over. This submitter was riding his Kawasaki Concourse when an oncoming Mazda came completely over the double yellow line into his lane. After taking to the shoulder to avoid a head-on collision, our submitter turned around and caught up to the Mazda driver before gesturing for him to pull over. He then called the police. The Mazda driver admitted to falling asleep at the wheel. The police fined him over $700 US for reckless driving. Our submitter said he still shakes when he watches this video, and having a camera as a biker is a must. Watch what happened when Mike was on his way home.
Whoa, that was really bad.
He was on his way home from work when a car cutting through traffic behind him was struck by an oncoming SUV. Since he was carpooling with a coworker and other people were stopping, Mike continued on his way home. Matthew was on his way to lunch when the driver ahead of him suddenly pulled into the intersection even though the light was still red. Matthew beeped his horn, and the other driver realized what was happening and stopped before backing up partway. When the light turned green, Matthew gave them a little extra space, just in case they forgot to shift back into drive. Major was driving to work when another car passed him on the shoulder at insanely high speed. Thankfully, no contact was made. Major contacted the police and gave them the other car's license plate number, and he hopes they teach the other driver a lesson. Edward was driving his Kia Niro when a pickup driver passed him on the shoulder. With no prior interaction, the pickup driver pulled in front of Edward and slammed on the brakes. After Edward rear-ended the pickup, the driver sped off. Edward wasn't able to pursue the pickup after his car's safety systems detected damage to the battery cooling system and shut down the car. When he called 911, he was told no officers were available to respond. A family member drove Edward to the police station where he made a report. His insurance claim is still pending, but he expects his Kia Niro to be totaled and plans to replace it with a Tesla Model Y. Speaking of Teslas, Will and Em were driving behind a Tesla when the driver made an illegal U-turn right in front of them, forcing them to slam on the brakes to avoid a collision.
That Tesla man can't drive.
That Tesla driver is lucky that Will and Em were paying attention. They were in a Honda Pilot. Thankfully, this ended up being a Tesla behaving badly video and not a Honda bump. Zach had just exited a highway in his Ford F-150 when he was forced to slam on his brakes to avoid hitting a red light runner. Now that was a close one. Thankfully, no contact was made, but it doesn't look like the girl driving the car even realized how close she came to having a really bad day. Johnny was stopped at a red light when the Polestar 2 behind him began slowly creeping toward him. Suddenly, it rolled right into the back of his Honda Civic. Both drivers pulled into a parking lot. The other driver immediately admitted fault, claiming he'd dropped a water bottle underneath his brake pedal. Thankfully, nobody was hurt. Even though they exchanged insurance information, Donnie found out the other driver's insurance doesn't cover the Polestar. His own insurance provider is now following up, but Donnie now wishes he'd involved the police. Thankfully, his Civic has already been repaired at a cost of $3,700 US, which took just over 3 weeks. Braden was driving down a country road when he ended up behind a pickup truck pulling a farming implement. He had a feeling the field cultivator was going to hit more than just the occasional tree branch, and he was right.
It's gonna hit one of these mailboxes or something.
Sure enough, the cultivator hit a mailbox when the pickup driver got too close. Braden kept going and doesn't know if the other driver stopped, but he said the damage didn't look too bad. Alexander had just entered a shopping center parking lot when he watched the driver of a white sedan nearly hit a silver Acura SUV.
Yay!
Thankfully, Meow, both drivers braked and avoided a collision before the driver of the white car backed up and allowed the Acura to proceed. Meow! Dawson was approaching his exit in a construction zone when a BMW driver decided to muscle his way in front of Dawson's Ford Fusion. The BMW driver excused his behavior by telling Dawson, "I had my signal on." The police responded and cited the BMW driver for improper lane change after watching Dawson's dashcam video. The BMW driver's insurance provider accepted liability as soon as Dawson sent them the video, not even waiting to get the police report. They paid Dawson $2,400 US to fix his Ford Fusion. It seems like everyone except that BMW driver understood two things. Your turn signal doesn't give you the right of way, and other drivers aren't required to avoid hitting you if you're the one breaking the law. Max was waiting for traffic to proceed through a single-lane construction zone when impatient drivers behind him decided it would be a good idea to drive through an oncoming turn lane to skip the wait. Sadly for them, an oncoming driver needed to use that turn lane, and he was not happy about the illegal use of his lane by the entitled drivers. Max even put his arm out his window to signal to the other drivers not to continue, but he was ignored. He said that if the front car had been headed off a cliff, the Seattle area would now have fewer bad drivers. He also told us he took our dashcam recommendation and picked up a Voiceover A129 Plus Duo. Remember, the link and an exclusive coupon code is in the description. Jeremy's dashcam records in a very low frame rate, then speeds everything up to 60 frames per second, so we did our best to smooth it out for you. He was on his way to work at 45 miles per hour when the driver of a Honda pulled out in front of him. Thankfully, Jeremy was able to bring his Toyota Venza to a complete stop and avoid a collision with the Honda minivan. Julia was being tailgated by a Nissan SUV driver on the highway. She told us he was following so closely she couldn't see his headlights in her rearview mirror. Eventually, he used an exit lane to go around her. She thinks he was focused on her and didn't notice the Ford in front of her. The couple in the Ford called the police while Julia provided them with a copy of her footage. As she pulled away, she told us the Nissan driver was glaring at her and shaking his head. She's hopeful her dashcam footage prevented a false insurance claim. We've got one more video from Jeremy to show you. He sent us this footage to show us what a Mennonite traffic jam looks like. Can you imagine getting around this way every day? I wonder if any of them have dash cams.
Wham, bam, we got a Patreon man. Please support the show.